The end of the American Indian Wars, the Great Sioux War, Wounded Knee, and Bear Valley. Origins. The American Indian Wars have their origins with the European colonization and settlement of North America in the 17th century. The European powers of Britain, France, Russia, the Netherlands, and Spain would often fight with the natives over control of the land and its resources. The Europeans wanted more land to build settlements and produce cash crops such as tobacco and cotton to trade and export. However, most natives didn't believe in the European concept of land ownership. They believed that the earth provided everything that they needed and that the land belonged to their ancestors. Generally, the French developed a better relationship with the natives than the British, as they never really wanted to truly settle North America. There were some permanent cities, but they mainly used the region for trade and to harvest resources like animal furs, so they didn't typically encroach on native territory with numerous settlements and plantations. The French and Dutch often even intermarried with the natives to continue the expansion of the fur trade. As the British colonized and conquered the East Coast, tensions grew between them and the natives. The natives saw that continued British settlement would destroy their way of life as the settlers often stole their food and the colonists' livestock would eat and trample over native land. The British almost won any conflict, and the defeated native tribes were often forced to sign treaties that gave up their claim to their land, recognized British rule, and forced them to relocate further west. The British often massacred or sold defeated natives into slavery in the Caribbean, clearing the land for more colonists to claim. The natives were often just as brutal when they attacked British settlements, creating further resentment as the British settlers began to form a new American identity. The natives, however, generally preferred British leaders over the American colonists because of land rights. In British North America, it was illegal to seize land without compensation, and with the Proclamation Line of 1763, American colonists were forbidden to settle outside of the area in red without signing treaties with the natives first. By the time of the American Revolution, the natives typically fought on the side of the British, which further escalated tensions once the Americans won. As the United States continued to expand and settle westward, they came into conflict with the natives of the Great Plains when the former wanted the latter's land and resources. The Lakota Empire. During the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the Lakota conquered the land around the Black Hills and dominated the northern plains regions of North America. They had advanced trade networks receiving goods from faraway lands such as the Pacific coast and the Gulf of Mexico and collected tribute from several tribes and even the United States. The Lakota were originally from further south and east between the Great Lakes and Missouri Valley, but rapid European expansion drove them to the northern plains. With the arrival of the Europeans, however, the Lakota got access to metal tools, horses, and guns, which they used to conquer land. The United States and Lakota started off on generally good terms as they traded items such as guns and furs, but the relationship soured once the United States acquired Lakota territory from France in the Louisiana Purchase, and the Lakota refused to cede their land. Relations continued to deteriorate when the California Gold Rush of 1849 brought hordes of white settlers who disrupted buffalo herd movements. The Lakota saw this as the United States not respecting their territory and began to attack settlers, wagon trains, and government offices in the area. Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and other leaders began to mobilize their armies and allies for battle. This confederation of these plains tribes, including the Lakota, is known as the Sioux. The Battle of Little Bighorn. In 1874, the United States sent General George Custer to the Black Hills with an expeditionary party where gold was discovered and leaked news of it to the press. By 1876, the Black Hills, which are sacred for the Sioux as this is where they believe the center of the universe is and where many spirits live and travel through, were occupied by thousands of gold prospectors who polluted the rivers and streams. The settlers were there illegally as per the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868, which stated the Black Hills belonged to the Sioux, but the United States government looked the other way. The United States tried to buy the Black Hills from the Sioux, but they refused as this land was priceless to them. Then the United States demanded the Sioux surrender the Black Hills or face repercussions, but the Sioux again refused and were labeled as hostile, so the United States Army stepped in. By late spring 1876, thousands of Sioux, led by Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, had gathered in a camp along the Little Bighorn River. The United States ordered them to return to the reservations or risk being attacked. Once the natives did not return, the United States sent in the army to resolve the situation. After Crazy Horse defeated General George Cook in the Battle of the Rosebud, the natives felt emboldened as the Americans felt more enraged. General Alfred Terry ordered George Custer's 7th Cavalry to scout ahead in the Little Bighorn Valley in Montana for enemy troops, and on the morning of June 25th, Custer, who underestimated the size of the native forces, decided to divide his 600 soldiers into three groups and attack rather than wait for reinforcements. Custer and his group of 200 soldiers are then quickly surrounded and annihilated. Massacre at Wounded Knee. The loss at the Little Bighorn angered the United States, who then sent out much more soldiers to quell this threat, and the year after the battle, the United States seizes the Black Hills, Crazy Horse surrenders, and Sitting Bull is driven to Canada. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was the Sioux' greatest victory, but the other battles were often won decisively by the Americans. The American military commanders then ordered the eradication of the buffalo to try to starve the Sioux into surrender, and with the buffalo population decimated and little food, the Sioux submit to American rule and relocate to reservations where their language and culture were suppressed and where Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull were killed. A movement called the Ghost Dance spread in Native American reservations between 1889 and 1890, which aimed to reunite the living and dead spirits to fight on their behalf to end American expansion and to bring peace, prosperity, and unity to Native people. The United States became alarmed by this and demanded that a band of ghost dancers surrendered their weapons on December 29, 1890, at Wounded Knee Creek, South Dakota. The situation is tense, but the natives begin to give up their weapons while a few begin to ghost dance. The situation turned critical when a struggle ensued after a deaf man named Black Coyote refused to give up his gun and a shot went off. The armed 7th Cavalry then began to shoot scores of native men who just surrendered their weapons. As the women and children attempted to flee, the soldiers turned and shot them as well. Hundreds of unarmed Sioux, primarily Lakota, with almost half of them being women and children, are massacred and buried in an unmarked mass grave. The majority of the American casualties and injuries in the engagement came from friendly fire as the American soldiers were firing their weapon recklessly. Military leaders at the time called it a battle and were rewarded with 20 medals of honor despite it truly being a tragedy. This ended the Ghost Dance movement, Sioux resistance, and became one of the last major confrontations in the American Indian Wars. Battle of Bear Valley. The Battle of Bear Valley was a small skirmish fought on January 9th, 1918, between the American 10th Cavalry, who were Black Buffalo soldiers, and the Yokoi tribe in Bear Valley, Arizona. The Yokoi were at war with the Mexican government over land and bought arms in the Arizona territory to fight the Mexicans. The Mexican government complained, and coupled with complaints of butchered livestock by Arizonan ranchers, the United States government sent in the army to resolve the situation. A short firefight ensued between a small number of combatants, which resulted in the death of the Yokoi commander and the capture of 9 others who spent 30 days in prison and were released. Though the conflict was merely a skirmish, it was the last time the United States Army and Native Americans had armed conflict, ending the American Indian Wars in the United States and completing the conquest and subjugation of North America. To conclude, I would like to give a quote by Crazy Horse that sums up the Indian Wars pretty well. We preferred our own way of living. We were no expense to the government. All we wanted was peace and to be left alone. Thank you.